Having duplicated the setup from the upper lip to the lower lip, as we see here, then, the basics of our lips are essentially done. Just like the simple rig, we're then going to move on to the naslab, the nasolabial fold. And there's nothing hugely special or exciting here. As you can see, I've just done a setup ahead of time here, but this is to show you a specific little twitch on this. You can see what I've done is I've used a spline again, just like we did with the lips there. I'm not going to go through the setup because it is basically the same thing, bunch of nulls, track the spline points, then you have tracker nulls that are on the spline and bones following them, right? And this seems like it's all pretty good, and certainly, you can see how it kind of behaves here and the way that it slips about. It looks pretty cool, you can pull it up there and you get this nice sort of rise. Here's the problem with doing it this way though, is of course what's happening is the bones are sliding up and down this spline, right? And the nulls that are controlling the positions and therefore the stretches of the bones are distributing themselves over. So when this is moving up and down, the spline isn't getting a great deal longer or shorter. And that's the trick, because of course when we move our mid-mouth, you see we've still got our spline control coming up with it, because that's parented in the naslab control there, just the same as it was. But the mesh down here is staying behind, because of course you see that bone, which is at this point, isn't tracking with the controller. It's just sliding on the spline, and there's no reason to make it slide up at this point. With those details in mind, what we wind up with eventually is instead this. Yes, I know, big jump forward again, but what we've got here is exactly what we had in the simple rig. It's basically identical. We've just got these bones that are stretching between each point there, so no spline on them, and then we've got the outer mouth bones as well that are controlling that outer mouth area. The only difference that we've done slightly different here to the simple rig is that each of the naslabs there has its root just pointing straight down, a little root bone, so that's pointing directly down to give these, somewhat pre-rotation. As you can see, their coordinates here, their values, I should say, on rotation, that, makes them cleaner and less prone to do any gimbal flip. The same again for these outer mouth bones here. I've got a root for the upper ones that's pointing down and a root for the lower ones that's pointing up. This root for the lower ones is of course a child of the jawbone here, so they ordinarily go along with it. And the only other small difference is that I've added in one right at the corner mouth position here, and that's simply to account for the fact that this mesh is higher density. If we see what's going on at the corner mouth here mesh wise, we see that we've got these very tight little bands, so we really do want to be able to control those properly so as they don't crease or do anything too ugly. And of course what you can also see here in Modeler is the weight maps that I've put in, pretty much exactly the same as we saw on the simple face, but again, owing to the different geometry, you can see that I've just feathered them off slightly going out into the face here, whereas on the simple rig they were very block and just on those necessary lines. Got little feathering going out into the further lines here, and a gentle little feather as we come round into the chin. And the same with the mouth outer here, just gentle little 50% on the inside of the naslab there, and just again slightly here, but then strengthening at the chin position. So as the naslab is sort of feathering out and weakening, the outer mouth there is strengthening. So far then, what we're seeing isn't a huge amount of difference from what we did before. I mean, a couple of little differences, like using the nodes on the jaw slide and using the spline for the lips. But for the most part, what we've got is, pretty much identical. Are we just building the same rig again, a model? Well, to an extent, yes. As said back at the beginning, You know, part of the point of the simple rig was to introduce you to the main systems and mechanisms that you can use, or that you would really want to use during the construction of a face rig. And now with this guy, we're getting into a bit more of the detail. That doesn't mean that everything's going to be different, although we do see some different options, like using splines on the lips. However, now that we're getting the mouth to this more complete stage, we are going to start seeing some important details. So, I mean, let's just sort of move our jaw about, since it's all going, and it's sort of looking okay, but something weird is happening here up on the top lip area. If we look at it in side view, then yeah, look at that. That's definitely something strange going on there. What could it be? Well, it's very easy to see what it is. If I grab my lower lip here and I move that down, oh look, that's pulling at the, outer mouth above the upper lip there. Clearly it's these bones, because of course they are part of the, or rather they are influencing the outer mouth weighted area, which also exists up here. You see, we just have this one big loop weight map around there like that. Now, how do we want to go about solving this? Well, there's two ways really. First of all, we could just go for more specific weighting. So we could create, a weight map that was just the, upper moustache area here for those, top side bones, and then another specific weight map for the underside, and maybe one on its own for the, mid lip. Getting the exact weight and blend between them though, because of course this whole thing functions as a ring. You've got this whole movement that takes place like this. We really would like to be able to, see that blended in much more nicely in an ideal sort of situation. We would have less of that need to, really balance our weights. The other way around it is to realise why this is happening. And the reason, of course, is because of the fall off that we used. We've used a really wide fall off, or low power. You notice, of course, if I bring this down, so there we are, it's pulling on the vertices up there. If I jump back to bones and I change this to, let's say, the 32, look at that, that fixes that up a lot. This now looks bad, but the only reason it looked good before was because I was getting less pull. I would just need to move this controller slightly less, you see, to get that kind of deformation. 32 is perhaps still a little bit sharp. You should find that on this mesh 16 works pretty well, and what we'll find if we do that, there we go, you see, we get a little bit of fall off into the upper lip there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The whole face is moving. You can think of it as more in the way of automation, but now we've got much cleaner, difference of deforms between the upper and the lower set like this, and that's starting to look a lot more fleshy. Of course, there was a reason that we did that, inverse square rather than inverse to the 16 before, and that was our jaw behaviour here. So we're back to that sort of collapse there. Now, maybe that's not so bad, I mean, you don't notice it that often. You'd have to have the camera round at the side like this to see it, but there's no guarantee that you're not going to, and if you do have a view of your character like this in shot, it is, fairly noticeable. So what we're starting to see is the need to really start putting in, more deformation detail into our character. So what we're going to do is start dealing with some of that stuff. So firstly then, how can I, sort of fix this? What's a good alternate? Well, let's just have a little look at something, shall we? Let's find the good old jawbone again. There it is. Okay, let's add a child to it. Let's call it jaw under here. What I'm going to do, I'll just leave it on point where it is. That's perfectly fine, really. And I'm just going to, actually maybe I will just move it somewhere. I'll put it somewhere here-ish, I guess. Bring it round like that. Bring its rest length down like this and get it more or less along there. So it's lying across the under throat area. So it's currently still got the jaw weight map. Now let's give this a little bit of scaling, see what we get. well, okay, it's pulling on the whole jaw, but you see it's mainly affecting the under throat area there, right? It's pulling on the side jaw and it's pulling on the chin a little bit. Again, remember we put hold bones in the simple character. Let's grab ourselves another child bone of the jaw here. Call this the jaw hold left. We'll sort of size that and, you know, get it into position like this so it's inside the, you know, jaw edge, whatever you want to call it there, right? And let's just sort of rest that position. Okay, let's see now how that's holding up when we scale this fella. Okay, that's better. It's just pulling on the throat now. It's not pulling on the jawline there, so that's good. Right, let's bring this down. Wow, look at that. That's really collapsing now because, of course, we've got this bone that's holding all of that in place. But when we scale it down, aha, we can start to get this. Now it's going lumpy, but, you know, when you open your jaw like that, you know, the skin and the fat under your chin here, I mean, it does fold. It does lump up, right? You see that? You could, of course, create a specific weight map in there if you wanted, just to attenuate where the effect is. That would be fine. But honestly, I think as it sits there, it does work out pretty well. What we also see is happening here is that is now strengthening the influence here, so that's starting to come over a bit. So let's work on you a little to unrest that bone so that we can move it with some ease. Let's just bring it a bit further forward and like this, so it's not going so far back on the jawline there. To rest length down a touch like that. Perhaps it can come further in as well. You look at it in perspective, get a better idea of where it's sitting in the mesh. Okay, let's try it there, shall we? Down again. Okay, that's somewhat better. Of course, then we see the effect when that is scaled as well. Okay, right, that's looking more convincing. So, what shall we do with this? Well, let's just automate it, right? We're coming off of the jaw controller here, so let's just find a range for it when it goes up. We don't really need to care that much. Maybe we will. It comes down. Obviously, you want to do stuff to it. How do we want to create the linkage? Well, personally, I'd go for nodes. We could do it with an expression, but I like nodes because, of course, that will make it nice and easy to get a two-way effect. So as we can get it when it goes up as well, we can, you know, grab this guy and stretch it back a bit like that. So let's open the motion options for this bone, come to IK and modifiers, let's add a nodal motion, get ourselves the item info here. This is, of course, going to be looking at the jaw control item there. That's the jaw control null. We are interested, of course, only in its pitch axis. So let's get the rotation here, and we can just take off the Y channel, which is, of course, equivalent to the pitch when coming from rotation. Let's get ourselves a gradient here. We want the input, of course, to be this pitch. We know that it's going to be somewhere negative, so let's put in a -1. We're going to use the alpha again. This is going to be our scale. So here at 0, so no rotation, alpha 100, scale 100. We're going to go up as far as, or let's just take it as far as it could possibly go, shall we? Which is, what is that? -12.4, but of course use the node probe because we are in radians here. So that's -0.216 and some change. So let's add a key, position, -0.216. And then we're going to want to scale this to, what should we say, something like that? It's around there. What is that? 1.242. So let's set the alpha here to 124.2. Yep, that's times 1.242. Let's just undo that momentarily. Bring it down to whatever its, you know, crazy max is going to be. Something like this, let's say. Bring you right down then. Let's shrink you a lot. Let's be somewhere like this. We probably want some creasing when it goes that low, so let's have it around here, shall we? Okay, what is that? That's 0.518. So let's throw in a key. That's going to be 51.8%. What is it going to be at? The rotation is 0.46 radians. So let's change the position here to 0.46, and we can also add an in-between key to this so we can tween it. This is one of the other reasons that I like using nodes for this sort of stuff, because it means that you can tween these actions. So let's get it about halfway, something like that. What's that? 13 degrees, right? And that is 0.230. So let's throw a key in there. Its position 0.230 radians. What scale do I want this to be at? Let's say a huge amount different, is it? So it's 0.532. The alpha here, 53.2%. Now what we need is a make vector. Let's make sure that it's first of all just set to 1, 1, 1, because obviously you don't want to have this start affecting. When we plug this into scale, we want to maintain the values of 1 and 1 for the x and y. And the alpha here, output for the gradient, we plug to the z, plug this into scale, and there we go. We've got our lovely little automated bone there doing our rote area borders like that. It's pretty lovely looking. So we like that quite a lot. With that done, let's just grab this bone here again, which is obviously just, causing that effect over there to occur. Let's bring up its properties and let's just try bringing down its strength. There, you see? And we can just tease that out. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of it because that causes our jaw to shrink, but we can just tease it up. Oh, something like that, 12, 13%. Looks really good. There we go. So we'll set you back to 0 again. Just get you, Mr. Bone. Obviously, we're going to want one for the right side. Clone you. Find where you are in our scene editor. There you are. Let's rename you, obviously, to be the right-hand side. Flip your X position. Flip your heading. And rest you. Let's check that we're all good over here as well. Yeah, there we are. That's really behaving quite nicely now. So now that we've gotten this far and we've started to put these little touches in, we should realise that of course we can start to go an awful lot further. Now of course whether or not you want to will vary from character to character, rig to rig, and how much time you want to spend putting in. However, a lot of it is very useful, especially once it comes time to animate. Because even though rigs of this style, have loads of control, you've got all of these, things that you can move about to get exactly the posing and so on and so forth that you want, getting a lot of that over and over and over again as you're keyframing can be quite laborious. And of course there are certain things about the shaping of the face and the way it behaves and responds which tend to work a certain way, if not always, then most of the time, like dealing with the underjaw and chin. That's not just a simple deformation correction, you could have a control there perhaps, and so rather than taking this under chin bone that we've got and saying, oh, let's just slap a control on it so the animator can squash it and nudge it as he needs to, we've, done that essentially for him. And it is doing little tricks like this that will really start to make a face rig come alive and be a pleasure to animate with, as well as, just look really impressive when you start posing it. So what else have we got? Let's continue where we left off with the jaw, shall we? Because there's other stuff that we can do here. Whilst we've got, the actions there for him opening his mouth, we haven't got anything for him closing it at the minute. Of course, we see the lips just overlap one another. We don't have a chew action, so to speak, a crunch action, whatever you might want to call it. So how about we put something like that in? What we're going to want to do for that, obviously, is to put some automated control onto the lips. But, of course, we don't want to interrupt our manual control. We don't want to have something taking over the movement of this controller and now we can't pose it. That's obviously no good. So how do we deal with it? Well, we can deal with it in a couple of ways. Either we could have yet another base under something. So where is it? Where's our, our up lip mid control? There it is, right? It's got the up lip root here, so maybe we could do something to the up lip root itself. We could nudge that about somehow, or we could create another base or whatever. Lots and lots of options depending on how you structure your nulls, how you base them and zero them and whatnot. You can just put more nulls in here to add more layers of control. if you find that easier to do organisationally. But you don't have to, because you can always make these things additive, at least if you go away from using constraints and go into using either expressions or nodal. You can just make your adjustments add onto keyframed values. So let's have a little look at doing something like that. So let's grab our jaw controller here, right? And let's just, bring it right up into the full-on chew, about as crazy as it could get. Let's not bring it all the way, because we've still got to leave room for the upper lip. Yep, so let's just say that this is going to be the maximum point of it, right? We're going to use nodes again, because I love them. They're great and quick and easy. And we're going to want some at least similar stuff to this, so let's just copy those that we had already for that under chin bone there. Let's copy those nodes, Control C. And let's go with the uplip root, right? Because that's a nice, easy thing that lets us manipulate the entire upper lip like this. And let's also not forget that we have got somewhere the lower lip root as well, which we can similarly manipulate like this. Now the first thing to notice, of course, is they're not at 0, 0, 0, are they? Because of course, they were just coming off the face root or the jaw track here respectively. Is that a terrible thing? Should we have done this all earlier? No, it's no big deal. We see that we need to do it now, and we can do it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a null. I'll call this the up lip root base. Okay, and we'll create another one, which is going to be, you guessed it, the low lip root base here. Let's first of all just set our jaw control here back to 0 rotation, so as we're not putting things in at funny, poses. Got our uplip root base, just switch to bounding box. We're going to need to see our uplip root and our low lip root. So let's just unhide those guys. Grab the uplip root base. Where are you? There you are. Bring you in and just snap. There you go. Snapped to the uplip root. Yep, good. And the low lip root base. That up. Snap it in there. So, low lip root, that's a child of the jaw track, yep, so the base also becomes a child of the jaw track, rather amazingly. And then the low lip root, just shrink the hierarchy there. We'll just take that guy, of course, making sure we've got parent in place on, and we'll just parent it to the low lip root base. Bingo. Do exactly the same for the uplip root. Where's that? There it is. That's a child of the face root, isn't it? I do believe. Let me shrink the mid-mouth. Uplip root base, there you are. Child of the face root. Grab the uplip root. Child of the uplip root base. Let me just shrink down my NASLabs there. Right, low lip root base, uplip root base. You can of course see that nothing has changed here. Everything still works exactly the same. One of the advantages to separating out your deform rig from your control rig. Lets you make these sorts of changes after the fact without any hassle. So let's rotate our jaw back up to where we wanted it to be. Let's say it's around there, shall we? Let's get our low lip root base, or sorry, I should say our low lip root. Let's just move that down a bit. Let's get our uplip root, move that up a bit. Okay, now that's good. We're also going to do something else to these guys. Yup. Because what else happens when you sort of crunch your jaw like that? Well, your lips, they squash, don't they? They don't just move, they squash. So let's put some squash in there. Because, of course, what have we got? Well, we've got, squash effect here coming from our main lip controls, don't we? At least we should do. I can't remember at this stage if I showed us putting that on the lips. But if I didn't, it is identical to how we did the bank twist when we just, assigned the bones in the lips to the bank twist of these controllers that allows us to, give them a rotation on twist, right? Do exactly the same thing for scale. I probably scaled that out a bit far on X, really. It shouldn't come out quite that much, so we just smush it there. And let's get the upper lip as well here. Just stretch it out there by using the X. Ooh, again, a bit much. And let's just squash it down a little bit like that. That's good. The uplip root, I'm going to move slightly forwards as well, like that. Okay, so there we go. We've got this sort of you know, chewy, puckering shape going on from him having chewed his jaw closed like that. So we see that we're going to have a few nodes going on here. So let's take them nicely and in order. Let's start with the low, seeing as it's first up in the scene editor. We get its motion options, we add a nodal motion. Let's just paste in those nodes that we copied previously. Okay, we've still got the jaw there, and this of course is its pitch channel. Now the gradient, this is doing something different this time. It's going into negative again, but it's not really going into positive, or at least we're not going to need to adjust the lips when we go into positive. Or, I say, are we? Because you know, we can do that as well. For the moment, let's just look at the negative side of this, shall we? So there we are, that's position 0. So let's just get rid of the ones after that. Remember, that's the jaw opening down here. This is the jaw closing up here. So what is our current value? Negative 0.116. So negative 0.116 radians. And what do we want this to be? Right, what was it? It's the low lip root, isn't it? And we've moved that to negative 2351 millimeters. So we put that in as, I think it's negative 0.2351. Just bear with me a second whilst I double check that. This will, of course, in the make vector go into Y. The X and the Z will be 0. Of course, as we can see here, they stay at 0 for this maneuver. Let me just double check we are correct here. Plug that to position. Yes, that is indeed correct. You see, I can't move it. It just stays there at negative 2351. Don't mind me just making sure I've got the right number of zeros here. By the way, if you are stuck for converting millimeters into a percentage, remember that 100% equals 1 equals 1 meter. Yep. So you could just do negative 2.351 millimeters. Okay. That would give it you as a fraction of 1. Yep. But you need that times 100%. So all you then do is just to multiply by 100. So that takes off those zeros. 351. That's how you get it. So that's great. That's giving us that. Might we want to make this additive? Ooh, are we going to have other things that affect the root? Yes, we might do. Remember, of course, on the simple rig, the little whole lip movers that we put on? We might want to use those again. In fact, we will put those on again. You'll notice we haven't yet. And those, of course, were going to control the root, weren't they? So that means we've got to be careful not to override that for later. Or when we build it in later and we discover that, oh no, our nodal motion has overridden it, we've got to know where to come back in and change that. So what do we have? Well, we have the input here, which is of course the item position itself. So let's get ourselves a math vector, add. Yep, we take the current item position, it's added to whatever's coming out of here, and then we can plug that into position. So if I just key this back to 0, you see it's doubled up there, is Y. There we go. That's now at 0. Okay, so there we have it. That's working well. Let's close that off. Let's just copy what we've got here already. Okay, bring that to the up lip root, and we can just paste that nodal motion on here. Let's turn it off for a minute, because obviously the thing that we want to see is the different value on it. Now in this case we've got 2, right? We've got one for the Y and the Z, because we brought it forward a bit as well. So let's open this, get the whole Y here first, and that is positive 579. So let's change that to 579. Okay, that will give us the Y position. Let me just bring this over here so we can toggle it. Notice again, it's additive, so I need to set that to 0. Okay. Whoops, that's gone wrong. Why has it gone wrong? Well, because I forgot to remove the negative, didn't I? So there we go, of course, positive 579. There we have it. Then what do we want? Well, we just want to copy this gradient here, because we want another thing which is the same again. It's being driven by the same thing, which is our jaw control pitch, but this is going to be the Z, and what's the Z value? Negative 1.78. So change this back to negative 178. Okay, that's good there. Make sure we key that back to 0. Plug the alpha into the Z, and there we go. Toggle it, we can see the effect of that there. So with that all on, let's see it in action. We've got, yeah, we can crunch up more there, whatever. Okay, that's going completely wrong. Why is it doing that? Well, the reason, if we care to look, is fairly simple. It's the downside of copying and pasting, or rather the care one has to take copying and pasting. That's at 1. It's pushing it to 1 meter when rotation goes to 0. That's incorrect. It should be 0. Because, of course, I copied it from the bone, which was scale 1. That's not exactly what I want here now, is it? So we'll do that. Come to the upper lip, grab your guys, so that there should, of course, be 0, because we want it to go back to position 0. And this one, we're also at that key, position 0. We're wanting it to go to position 0. Now, of course, what we see is it does that. Look, see how our lips react there to the closing, crunching jaw? It's wonderful. So what next? Well, we also, of course, put scaling on these guys, didn't we? That was our actual, control, main control now that we'll be grabbing for the lip there. So we want to have a similar thing on here. So once again, let's just paste. Let's just unhook that because it's not the position that we're changing. We are again going to be going to 2 different points. So let's get this gradient. Now this, of course, is scale. So let's make sure that we get the alpha relating to rotation of the jaw 0 back to 1 again. So as it's scaled at 1, we'll make this be the X scale. So at the next one here, it's wanting to go to 1.6. So that's 160%. Make sure we plug that to the X scale here. We're then going to want Y, so let's just copy that. What is the Y scale value? It's 0.6. So let's set this guy to 60%. That then becomes our Y. Notice we do not have a scale output on here, so we need to get one. We can just, of course, do that from the item info. So just copy and paste that. And of course we want to change the item because we are looking at this particular controller its own self, which is the upper lip M. So there's that there. We can take that. Let's get its scaling. Plug that in here. We're adding the 2 together. Let us set it back to 1, 1, 1. Plug it into scale. And of course we get this. Why? Because we're adding. We are adding, are we not? What was this going to? It's going to 160%. We want to add 60%. That's more like it. This one was shrinking. It's not just going to 60%, it's going down by 40%, or 0.4, so negative 40% is what that should be, you see. Now, of course, it works correctly. So that's good stuff. Let's copy this guy. Come over here to the low lip M, which is the other one, of course, that we did a scale adjustment on. Paste the nodal motion onto it. Just unhook that temporarily so we can see the values. So the X, that's at the top here, 20% that we're adding on. It's going up to 1.2. The Y, that's coming down to 0.694, so that's what, 30.6%. So negative 30.6. Rather, we are adding negative 30.6. Set it by default again, back to 1, 1, 1. Okay, and now when we plug the scale on, bingo. Let's make sure, of course, to take the item info, we're changing that to the low lip M. Let us not forget that, because that's very important. So then, with all of that done, let's take a look at what we've actually got. Let's see it in action. We've got our jaw open. And there it goes. Look at that lovely little, mouth, lip squeeze there as we crunch the jaw. Now, lovely as that looks from this angle, of course, what looks really good is when we see it from the front, because look what we can do. We can chew. Just like that, we've got our guy chewing. His lips are going and everything along with it, which is just delightful. Of course, this all plays in with the rest of our system. Now, we don't actually have a cigar to hand, but let's imagine that our fella here was, chomping on a cigar in his mouth, so he'd have his lips like that around his cigar, so he can do that. And yeah, he can still chew, so he can do that good old thing of having the cigar and going yong, 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 yong with that in his mouth. If this sort of control doesn't make you very, very happy, I honestly don't know what you're even doing watching this. So hopefully that's really good stuff for you right there. So let's just do a little tidy up whilst we're here, okay? We can do our hiding and locking of stuff that we're not needing now to see. Do the same for all the bones there, of course. And yeah, there we go. There's our face, at least so far. It's doing some pretty clever stuff already. So where next? Well, we can see a little adjustment here that's going to be helpful. Look at what happens when we get our jaw open too wide. Now, admittedly, that is very, very wide. It's probably never going to go quite that far. This is probably about the limit of it there. But, these upper teeth are starting to protrude through. And of course, one of the things that does happen, you can feel this on your own face if you, pull your upper lip right down whilst putting your fingers, either side of your nose, so over your, over your skin, but of course above your teeth, you can feel the flesh, rolling over and shaping over your teeth. Now, one way that we could attack that would be to, put a morph onto this area of geometry here to just sort of flesh it out a bit. That would actually work well, even though it's linear. It is a nice enough adjustment, and it's a small enough area. It's only, one or two edges here that would need to be adjusted, that it would give us a nice roller look. But we can also do it based off of these controls here, which of course we see when they're taken out on X, give you that bit of pull there. And of course we see that from the side, that's pulling the face out like that, so we're getting a more round out shape that's quite nice. So do it with a morph if you want. Certainly give it a go. If you get that on a rig, it's worth experimenting, finding different ways to try and attack things. On this particular character, I'm going to do it in this way. So what am I after? Well, I'm looking at the NAS Labs here, and these have got bases, right? These two controllers here, they have a base, and so when you can, it always pays to put automation onto base items or root items or things that you don't want to actually grab and move manually. Even though you can do it, generally it's better not to if you can avoid it. And so in this case, since we've got a good structure for doing that, then that is what we're going to do. So let's just start with the old left here. They are going to be an exact mirror of one another. Thing is, let's remember what this particular base is doing, right? This base is reaching for this mid null. Yep, this is the same setup that we used on the simple rig. In other words, this base 2 here, if we look at its motion options, has a constraint already on its position. Now, this is important because, of course, look, we click it and try and drag it, it won't move because it is fully constrained. We can only add a fixed value onto the constraint. There's no way in here of adding, another channel or an output from a node or whatever. And let's look at nodal motion. And we see, of course, with nodal motion, if you double click the output node, you do have an after IK option. Let me just demonstrate the problem with this, at least in this particular situation. Let me just get a standard old vector, okay, plug it to position. We'll set it to 0, 0, 0, like this. And of course, you notice that should go to 0 because I'm now telling it to be 0 on X, Y, and Z, but nothing's happening. If I check after IK, okay, it goes back to 0, right? This seems good. But let's look at our actual mesh. Well, surely the bone should have gone, right? No, it hasn't, because now this nodal motion is happening after IK. This control item, that is the child of the base there, is what is being reached for by the bone. Let's just go and find that bone, shall we? Here it is, the NASLab left. Let's just grab a bunch of them there. And look, we can see they're still in the same place. Why? Because they are operating on constraints and IK as well. So what is happening is our base null is just falling into its mid position between, these 2 points. We've got our control just sat on top of it. The bones are reaching for that control. And then after all of that has happened, our nodes are now pushing the base out the way. Clearly, after IK is not going to cut it. Before IK doesn't cut it, because then the nodes just get overridden completely by the constraint. Can I therefore just put the adjustment back on here? Yeah, sure, I can do. I can just put it directly onto this controller. But rather than do that, we can just add in another base. Why not? As good a reason as any to show it can be done. So let's just clone it once. Let's call it the NASLab A2, shall we? A for auto. We can, of course, get rid of its item shape since we don't need it. Set it to be black there. In case you're worried that something nefarious might have happened, you can just grab the NASLab 2 main control and, verify that that is still working. What we do, of course, this is in the same space. There's no space difference, so we can take that and just reparent it like this. So bingo, we're going to need the exact same thing on the right-hand side. There we are, set up on the right-hand side, happy days. And so now we can put our nodal motion onto this guy. So paste that on. We don't need to worry about additive here, so we can get rid of that stuff. Of course, for the item info, we've still got the draw control. We're only going to need one gradient because we're only going to move it on one axis, which is going to be the X. As to say, it's just going to be coming straight out like this. So here, position 0, that relates, of course, to the rotation of the jaw null, so rotation 0. We, of course, don't want it to move, so that's alpha 0. Let's see how far we want this jaw to rotate. It's going to come through quite a range here. Let's just bring it down an insane amount, shall we, like this, until the teeth really start to show through, which is there. Now, what is that value? 0.62. So get our second key here. 0.62 radians. Let's grab the A2 null there. See how much do we want that to move out on X by. Just have a look around here. It's going to be by this much, 40 millimeters. So back to our gradient. Again, in case you were stuck, 40 millimeters times 100. So that's kill both of the zeros. That's 4%. Okay. The Y and the Z, of course, in our make vector both want to be 0, and we just plug that into position like this. And we see that we can do that, and there we go. That all holds together quite nicely. However, of course, one of the things that we can do with the gradient is we can, of course, use this to animate over a range. So maybe we don't just want to worry about what happens at that insane maximum. Maybe we'll look at something halfway in between as well. So what do we have here? That's 0.2, so let's stick a key in there. That's at position 0.2, and we can bring this alpha value, get into perspective so I can see it like this, and just bring this alpha value, not that much. I mean, it could be 0 really, couldn't it? It doesn't even need to kick in just yet, so we could lose that key entirely. See that we're still working just fine there. So there we are, that's all good. Let's get your motion options back up. We copy the nodal motion from that. It will go absolutely identically onto the other side here. So let's just paste it in. It won't need any other adjustments or changes. We can see it there. And of course, then rotate that. It goes all the way to the stupid extreme, past which we're not so worried about it penetrating the teeth, because quite frankly, once the jaw has penetrated the throat, that might be as far as it would ever need to go, so we might not really care all that much. So next, plenty of other clever stuff we can do, but before we do, I really should put in those, global main lip controllers. To be perfectly honest, I should really have done this earlier. It's good practice to do things in proper order before you start working into the finer details to, take care of the big stuff. What can I say? Got a little carried away. Can't help yourself, and I'm sure that you'll do it yourselves. Anyhow, let's just sort these guys out. Again, largely the same as we've done before, so I've got two controls set up here. So I've got this up lip main base, which of course, there's the base and then there's the control, just as we had before. So let's take this guy and we're going to make you a child of the face root, because that's coming in the upper section here. And then the low lip main base, that's going to just be a child of the jaw track. So of course it goes with the jaw. Now, what do we want to be able to do? Well, we want to be able to orbit the lips, don't we? That's one of the things that we want them to do. So we've now got this lip root base that, of course, we were using to, base out things to get our nodal motion going on. But that lip root base is in that same position there. And what we want is another controller, of course. Let's go to wireframe mode further back, right? So as it's inside the teeth, so as the mouth orbits the teeth. So let's find an appropriate sort of position that's roughly a center of rotation. And I'm doing this with my fingers on the screen, sort of using them like a compass to roughly find the center of rotation that takes me around. And it turns out that it's actually around about right here where my mouse is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a null. Let's call this the up lip base orbit. Okay, and I'm going to bring that forward to coincide with where my finger is, which is right around here. So if you can imagine, put your finger on the screen where that null is, and the other one, and your thumb here where the main sort of lip controls are, and just imagine rotating around. You'll see you pretty much go around the teeth there quite cleanly. Just a little scotch forward. Okay, there we go. So let's take that guy, let's clone it once and twice. When we did this on the simple rig, because of the way that we had things parented together, we only needed 2, but in this guy we need 3. Okay, so we've got the up lip base orbit, we've got the low lip base orbit, and we've also got the mid lip base orbit. Okay, because of course we've got the up lip root, and of course the up lip root base, the low lip and the low lip root base. But let's not forget, we've also got the mid mouth, with the mid lip root here, that our, of course, mid lip controllers were coming off of. So let's parent these appropriately. The up lip, right, up lip root base, we can check it if we've forgotten that was a child of the face root. I checked it because I had slightly forgotten, or at least I just wanted to be 100% sure. So this is a child of the face root. Our up lip root base now becomes a child of it. Low lip base orbit, that obviously is going to be a child of the jaw track. And our low lip root base now becomes a child of it. Let me just set those root bases to black now that I'm done with them from our previous step, so I'm not confusing myself on colour. And then the mid lip base orbit will go back up here to, where is it? Under the mid-mouth base, because remember the mid-mouth base is the parent of the middle lip root, and the middle lip root is doing the position item thing, in order to keep halfway as the jaw opens. So what I've got under that are the bases for the left and right, and so we take both of those and make them a child of the mid lip base orbit. So this is just the reference base to reference where the 0 position is. This goes to halfway. This becomes a child of it, and then its original 2 children are under that there. Now, how do we want to deal with this? First of all, let's just grab the actual 3 orbit items there, okay? And we can just rotate them straight here on heading, and you can see them going round, and there's the mouth just doing its little orbit thing. Great. Now, how do we wish to control this? Clearly, we could tie different ones to different controllers, right? And if you really want to have, separately orbiting, upper lip and lower lip, then fine. But as you can see, all it really does is just sort of mush it, because, of course, we're on the spline. and so our deformation is just sort of rolling over that. It looks a bit weird. I mean, you can see that it is a interesting effect. You sort of get this almost chewy sort of action going on there. But it's a bit of a weird and an ugly way to create it. Really, it's best if we tie all of these to one controller for the orbit rotation, right? So in this case, I'm just going to use the upper main here. That's the one that I'll use for it. So I'll take the upper lip base orbit, low lip base orbit, and the mid lip base orbit here. Store assignee, come to this top lip control, and just hit rot item. We see straight away something's gone a bit mental. What was that? Well, it's the low lip base orbit. Let's just temporarily set the blend there to 0 so that we can see it with it off, and pop to bounding box. Of course, it's because of the angle that it's set on, right? The jaw track is at an angle here, and so since this has been parented on square, then it's offset at an angle already. Yep, so what do we see? Well, it's at 180, 47.8. What we want, of course, is to have this set on world, just like that. We could do it for the other two, but we only actually need it for the lower one there. So we can see that now operating as we would expect it to. We get this lovely bit of shaping as he squishes his lips from side to side. We also, of course, get the bank, so we can tip the whole mouth like that. And we also get the pitch. Whether or not we need it is debatable, but it is also kind of useful in this way. So that stuff's good. We're happy with the orbiting. So what else do we want to have? Well, we want to have the movement, don't we? We want the up-down to be able to move the entire lip at once. So let's deal with the upper lip first. Let's not forget that we put the nodal motion on the upper lip root. So again, in the same way as we saw the constraint taking place when we were operating over here for that draw open thing, we can't add a constraint to the upper lip root because it will totally override the nodal motion that we've used on it. We could just put another null in, another layer, but handily we've already got one here, which is either the upper lip root base or the base orbit. Either of these could be used. Because of course, if we take the base orbit, then that moves the whole upper lip like this, and of course the same, to bring it all out like this, we can do that from the orbit, so that's a perfectly fine idea. Could do the same from the root base, makes no difference at this point. The only thing that we have to be careful of course, is that whilst this is at 0, 0, 0, owing to its, its own base, neither of these are in terms of their position, so we will have to compensate for that. So I'm going to use the base orbit since I've already got a constraint going on it for the rotation here. So I'll just store the assignee, come over here, pos item, obviously it jumps back, so let me just pop over to position, turn this down to 0 so as I can see exactly what values I'm needing to add on to it. So on the Y it's negative, I can just copy and paste, which will make me get it exactly. So Y in the additive box, we drop that in there. On the Z, on the constraint add, the add to constraint box, we drop that in there. Now we can turn this back up to 100%, and there we go. There is our lip movement there. You'll notice that the side to side isn't working quite as strongly as it should. You'll notice if I grab the, where are we, the upper lip root base, right, and I shift that side to side, it's more pronounced, it's stronger. The reason for that is because, of course, this is just a disc, and to get it into this ellipse shape, I scaled its parent here, 4.9, let's make it a nice even 5, shall we? Which means, therefore, that when I come to the upper lip base orbit, I just take the X position here and multiply it by 5. Okay, there we go. Now it's moving as if it's properly locked, and we get that action going on there with our top lip. Let's jump to our lower lip. Now the base orbit, of course, because again of the angle of the jaw, the axis for this aren't square. So of course, if I just link it in and that moves up on Y, then it is going to move. Let me get it here. That's going to move up on Y this way, which of course is incorrect, is it not? Yes, it is. You see, it's going to be moving like that, which we don't want. Now, it was the low lip root that I did the nodal motion on, but the low lip root base is currently free, and because it's now been based, it's got nice flat axes here. So guess which one I'm going to use here? I'm going to use that. So we store assignee, we select this fellow, set it as the pos item. Once again, quite obviously, that goes wrong. So we just come over here, set it down to 0 whilst we find the appropriate values to add on, which are -6, whatever it is, millimeters there. On the Y, -22, some odd or other. On the Z, let's remember to find the low lip main base and the scale for that, which should be 5, and then we'll just come back over to the root base here and multiply the X constraint by 5. And there we can then turn that back up again to 100%, and when we grab this we should see, yes, there we go, we've got lower lip control available here. Anything else? Well, yes, of course, we've only got the upper and the lower. The mid lip points aren't moving. Now, maybe that's groovy, because, I mean, you know, you can do fun stuff like this whilst leaving the mid mouth alone, right? And, you know, maybe you quite, whoopsie, that's a bit too strong there. Maybe you quite like that idea. This sort of control might work for you. You know, in a way, it does sort of make sense. That the entire mouth is staying still. You're just moving the lips within what you might consider to be the mouth space, just quickly and easily there for both lips. Or maybe when you get both of these together, what you actually desire to do is the same thing as when you're doing the heading rotation. You want to be moving the whole mouth, in which case you need the mid as well. So if we come back to the mid lip base, either the root or the base orbit, it doesn't really matter. Obviously moving that moves the, the midpoints like this. So it would probably be good to tie that in as well. Once again, if I'm going to do that, I really want them to go 50% with this and 50% with that, don't I? So once again, we're either onto a node or an expression. For ease, I'm going to use an expression. I'll do it on the base orbit here. So bring up the good old graph editor. It's going to be very similar to one of these that we've got already here. So let's just clone that there. We don't need a left and right. We're going to call this the mid lip move. And what's it taking? What was this called? The up lip main and the low lip main. So up lip main.position.x, the low lip main.position.x. Now, of course, what we also notice is that, of course, I'm having to get the X channel here, but I want all 3 channels to work with this, don't I? So, of course, this actually needs to become the mid lip move X expression. So I take that, got the mid lip base orbit position X. Let's apply it. Let's clone it again, this time for the Y channel. Let's get the Y there. Let's change you out for the Y. This one here for the Y. Come to the Y and apply it. Clone it again for the Z. Get the Z and apply it. You see when I do that, something funky happens to the Z. Let's just disable that expression. Okay, so as we can see exactly why. Once again, it's an offset thing. Where have I gone? There it is, mid lip base orbit. See, that has a default base position of 139, whatever it is, millimeters there. So for the Z, we take this entire thing that we have got here, and we simply add on to it this many millimeters. So plus that many millimeters, which of course we have to enter as meters. So it's 0.1396672. Now turn that back on, all good. And let's see what we get, right? If we move these things, well, we're still getting that. We see the mid lips are moving a little bit, but not that much, right? What's going on? Of course, what we have to remember is that the mid lip base orbit, the child of the mid lip root, child of the mid mouth base, which remember what we did, if we bring up the scale, was we scaled, where was it? That one, the mid lip root. It got scaled. That means, of course, that since this is in a scaled space, we either need to multiply the values of this by the scaling, which is 10, or we just nix it entirely and realise instead that we should have done it on the actual mid-lip root. So once again, let's just wrap all of these guys here up in brackets for ourselves, and it's 10 times that on the Y here, 10 times that, and on the Z we still want to be adding on this certain amount, okay, but we're doing that afterwards. So we get another set of brackets and you're inside here, 10 times that. Now when we move them, we move them both together and we get a full mouth movement just like that in all of our axes. Let's just check it from the side for the Z. Yup, just perfect. But of course, when we only move one of them, because we're using the times 0.5 here of each thing, then it moves part way like this and part way with that one. So we get this really nicely behaving little fella that we can swing around like this, as well as of course swing side to side and do all of this clever stuff with. So before we carry on, let's just pause for a moment and reflect on, some of the stuff that we have been doing here. It should become quite apparent at this point of the vast array of these little, touches and adjustments that we could put onto a rig like this. For instance, perhaps you could put in a control so that when, you pull this up to do a smile, these nulls here automatically sort of reshape themselves to produce something that's more, in line to get that overall shape coming on. And that perhaps there's a condition included so that when the jaw is opened like this, they take a slightly different shaping so as to keep, the level across the lip like that. We could literally go on and on and on with a great number of these things. And it's not right to, it's not wrong to, and there are, of course, different ways that we could handle all of this. Using nodes here or expressions there, or putting things on bases, or adding on to existing controllers, or building in second layer controllers, which is what we've effectively done with these, main lip controls, all of that sort of thing. There is theoretically almost no end to it. So to that end, what I basically want to say is don't get too fixated on the stuff that we are putting in or aren't putting in to this particular rig, and of course the way that we're going about it. An awful lot of this stuff really I need to leave to you and your own experimentation and deliberation, so that you can figure for yourselves what works either for a particular character, a particular mesh, or your particular animation style. With that said, we will go in and put in one last little set of control for handling little bits of automated touch on these lips, and it's quite a lovely little controller, and that's going to be the sticky lips. So let's just run through that. I'll go into it, put it all together, and it's one of those things that once we set it up, it'll become apparent why we've attacked it the way that we have. So for the sticky lips, I sort of want these to hold together whilst the jaw is moving, right? Therefore, a good anchor point for the system is going to be the mid-root or the mid-base orbit, more like, as of course that holds the mid position with the jaw and is also connected to the whole, smushing of the mouth like this. Now what I want is a null that's going to act as an anchor or a constraint for each of these lip nulls, but not the mid, because obviously there's no upper and lower mid, or mouth corner, whichever we want to call it. So what I'm wanting are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the top, and of course 5 for the bottom, so 10 in all. So let's call them stick lip 1. You could do this right, left, up and lower naming, it doesn't matter, it's just naming. Create 9 clones for it, get them all named. You could of course just keep the index naming if you were wanting, that's allowable. Personally I like explicit names, old habit. Okay, so 10 stick lip nulls. I am going to make these children of, as we said, the mid-lip base orbit here. And let's just reset their position to get them there. Switch to bounding box so I can see things more clearly. And then we'll just drag snap them to the position of these nulls. So I'll put the 1 here and 2 here.
So the first 5 just run across the top lip like this, and then the second 5, I'm going to put 6 over here on the right side so they run across in the same order. Now with the lips stuck, I still want certain things to happen, namely I still want this response here to go off. So I'm going to add a couple more nulls. I'll call this first one stick lip, base 1 left. Okay, we'll also create a clone of that, which will be the base 2 left, and then 2 more, which is the base 1 right and the base 2 right. Let us take these fellows and also make them children of the mid-lip base orbit here. Then let's just get them in position. So I'm going to have the base 1 left. I'm going to bring it over in X so as it's pretty much in line with these 2 first lip nulls, right? Obviously they are at slightly different X positions. It doesn't have to go to one or the other, it just needs to be roughly in the same X position as they are. And then the 2, the same for the outer 2 lip nulls there, so something like this, I guess. And we can just, paste invert those positions onto the right side ones, just like that, so they're at the exact opposite locations. Now then, what I want to do is I want to take, so I've got the stick lip 1, which relates to this null. We can see its position there. So that's going to be a child of the base 2 right. Okay, so let's bring that here. Yep, so that's a child of base 2 right there. Then the number 2, so that's going to be a child of the base 1 right here. 3 is the center, stays where it is. 4, that's going to be the base 1 left as its parent. 5 is the base 2 left as its parent. 6 is then again the base 2 right. 7 is the base 1 right. 8 stays where it is. 9 is the base 1 left. And 10 is the base 2 left. So for instance, if we look at the base 2 left, you can see it's got those 2 nulls there with it. Now what I'm also going to do with these nulls, because it's a bit of a muck in here to try and see which is which with all these overlapping lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the actual stick lip nulls themselves here, and I'm just going to scale them down, which will have no, functional outcome. It's just to give me a better view here, so that I can actually see things with a little more clarity, as it were. So that's okay like that. And the bases for them all, I'm just going to lock and hide them now. I know that they're there. We're going to pick them up through the scene editor itself. We won't need to be selecting them in viewport, but I do. So I've got other nulls here. What was this? This was my orbits, weren't they? I haven't yet hidden and locked all of those guys. Okay, so that gives me a bit of a cleaner view of what we've got here. Right, so where next? Well, let's go with these bases. I'm going to take the base 1 and the base 2 here. Stored assignee for those. It's on the left side, obviously. Grab the left side mid-mouth controller, or mouth corner controller. Set it as pos item. Set world. Then for the base 1, set its multiplier to 1/3. Okay. For the base 2, set its multiplier to 2/3. You see that actually my positionings have jumped out here ever so slightly, so let's just re-snap these actual nulls to where they should be. There we go. So of course now what we see is those are, tracking just like the main lip controls. Yep. You see what we've done there? We've just replicated that sort of setup. So let's do the same over here for the right. Get those guys, store them, pick that, pos item. The first one constraining by 1/3, the second by 2/3, of course both world, and just adjust the positions of these nulls. And there we go. There's the same thing operating for the right side. And with that, just sort of mirrored mechanic there for what we already did on the main lip controllers, having sort of created this second layer of it, if you will. Here comes the fun bit. So we can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10 main lip controls here. Let's store these as our assignees. Then let us pick the stick nulls, again here, all 10 of them. Hit pos item, and of course world. And what we see we have, of course, now, is that the lips are sticking together when we open our jaw, right? But they're staying stuck while still shaping along with this. And indeed, of course, we can take the main control like this and do this stuff to it, and we can, you know, mush the mouth and turn it, and the lips are staying stuck together, okay, because the whole thing connects because of the hierarchy and where we've put things. Now, this is great, but of course what we can't do now, because they are constrained, is move our main lip controllers. But this is where the fun comes in. If I just select them all here, what we can do, if we pop open their motion options, is we can, you know, run their interpolate percentage here. So of course we can blend in and blend out that constraint. We've got this animated constraint here. All that we need now is a controller to take command of it. So I'm going to add a null, which I'll call sticky lips. What on earth should I parent this to? Let's just make it a child of the up lip root, shall we? So it'll always travel with the upper lip, wherever that may happen to be. And let's just reset its value there. Make sure we reset its scale, of course, as it's at 1. Not that it makes much difference, but still. And we'll just pop it out here, let's say somewhere in front. And I'll just give it a wee item shape here. I'll fill it. And I'm just going to put a scale on it so it looks something like this, I guess. Just as it's small and flat, maybe a bit smaller than it was. Okay, I'm only going to worry about its X position, let's say. That's what I'll use to drive. Then let us go through all of these lip controllers here and just click the envelope button on their interpolation percentage, because what we're going to use is an expression to connect this up. So we do that guy and that one, and just make sure that we are getting all of them like that. Let us then create an expression. We'll call it just stick lips. The value is the sticky lips, which is the name of the controller, dot position dot x, and that's basically it, because we're going to push it to 1 meter, which of course is equivalent to 100%. So let's just select all of these lip nulls, load their channels, just use the filter to get star dot pos item blend, oh dear, blend, there we go. So I've got all of their blend channels here, and we just apply that expression. Let's grab our stick lips controller, let's just give it a colour. How about purple? Let's go to its motion options. Let's give it xpos limits, so it's 0 to 1. Come back to our mesh. Right, there's our jaw. Lovely. There's our jaw opening and doing all of that, just as it was before. We grab the stick lips controller, and as we drag it to 1, bingo, our lips do a little zip for us. So we've got these zipper sticky lips like that. And so now, not only can we do the chew that we saw before, we can actually do a full chew like this, and the lips will stick. And of course, if we've got some pose going on, so we, you know, keyed in a bit of a smile or a slip or something like that, of that nature, we mushed our mouth about, that all holds together. And there we go. That's good old sticky lips operating there. Now maybe it's going off a bit far, maybe the 1 meter was a bit much, having it zip off all the way over there. So let's just say that the maximum is instead 0.25, which only allows it to come here, which is fine, I think. We just need to open the graph editor, find that expression, which is here, and let's just multiply it by 4. And so now, of course, when we go out to the 1/4 there, we get the same effect. So there we have it, a fully done lips set up there. Pretty splendid.